Okay, this is a diagram of a wiring harness for John Deere, or wiring schematic, and here's what somebody had done to the magneto. The magneto doesn't have anything going to it except for two spark plug wires, essentially, and it never had an on-off switch or anything like that. He choked it off, essentially, or killed it with the throttle. This one has a coil going to it, and all kinds of boogers going in it, and it was crazy. So I took it all apart, and we'll come back to this in a little bit. I took it all apart, and I kind of cleaned it up, and let's see here. Let's see if I can get a spark plug going to it. Of course it's not going to. Oh, why would it do that? When I roll this thing over, it has a spark. Let's see if you can see this. There it is. It's not a very big spark. Of course, I only got one wire in it, so it's not sparking on both sides. It's not a very bright blue spark. It's more of a yellow spark, which probably will extinguish itself inside the cylinder under compression. But I did my best to take a point file and file down the points with. It's a nail file, essentially, is what it is. Took the cap off. But the cap's questionable, the rotor's questionable, the wires going into it are questionable. My spark plug wire, well, it's not a metal wire, it's a carbon wire. On the inside, it's got carbon filament. Are questionable. The points are questionable. Well, the points aren't too bad because I filed them nice and set them nice. The condenser's questionable. So probably going to spring for a good tune-up for this. Points, condenser, rotor, cap, wires, and I'll probably have a much better, nicer spark when I get that done. Wasn't sparking at all. Now it is sparking, so that's good. Got that fixed somewhat, or advances towards it anyways. Okay, back to the schematic. Here's the schematic I drew up for the tractor. Starts with 12 volts. Of course, it goes to the starter. There's no fuse there or anything. It's just heavy wires going to the starter, and then it has the starter switch as such, the switch deal right there. So when you push down, it fires a starter. 12 volts, 6 volts, doesn't matter. It does if you're with your lights. I'm going to use something a lot more easy to get, readily available. I'm going to use 12 volts. The starter doesn't care. You're not going to roll it over that much. And it was positive ground. I'm making it negative ground now. Again, the starter doesn't care. It's just as long as it's got electricity going to it, it's going to spin the right way. You think, oh, it's going to spin backwards. No. It'll spin the right way. And then coming out of your 12 volt side, your 30 amp fuse, you can use a 20 if you want to, it's probably plenty, to a three-way switch. I call it a three-way switch. In is off, first position is the ignition's on. Ignition's always on with a magneto. Ignition on, I mean ignition going to the alternator is on. When you turn that switch, pull that switch out, your voltmeter will show 12 volts, and your wire going to excite the coil of the alternator, and then there's a ground. It's a one-wire alternator. And then the heavy load or heavy load lead going back to the battery. I use 14 gauge for everything. I know it's overkill. But in the heavy load I use 2 strands of 12 gauge going back to the battery. When you start the tractor, your voltmeter, and you rev it up enough where it starts making electricity, we'll go over the alternator too with this too, because I'll have to change pulley on it to a smaller pulley to make it spin faster. And you have to have about 800 RPM in order to make electricity, but once it does, it starts making electricity. You can idle it back down and it'll continue to make electricity. Really simple. And then the second position on your switch is to your lights. You got 2 headlights, the little dash light in the middle, and I'm going to put tail light. Of course, those are all ground. So there's your wiring harness for your John Deere. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do. It'll hang right there in case you want to copy it. Next, I want to go over the starter. And what I did is I took this cover off. I inspected the brushes. The brushes look okay. I inspected the commutator. It looks okay. I did not take this back plate off because you can't. The back plate is connected to the brushes, so you can't take the back plate off and lube that bushing back there. But you can take the front off, and then you can pull this out slightly, and you will have room enough to get yourself a Q-tip and a little lube down on that shaft on all 4 points and get it back in there, and you can move it back and forth and pull it back out, lube it again. So you'll get lube on that bushing in the very back, so it won't be dry. When you pull this all the way off, then you can dump out all the hornet's nests and whatnot that's built itself up in there. And you can also lube the shaft to it and this bearing. My other tractor has a grease zerk right here, and this one does not. I don't know why. Maybe it's an older model. Don't know. Don't know if it's my battery or this just turns slow, but it seemed like to me I guess that's going to be enough to turn that engine over. We'll see how much torque it has. If it's not beefy and torquey enough, maybe I'll send it out to have it rebuild. That's all I'm going to do, is I'm going to lube it and see if I can make it work. Switch was missing, so I replaced the switch. Switch cost about $13. So there you go. To our carburetor, there's our braze job. I know it looks hokey and terrible, but I'm going to grind that down a little bit. I'm going to coat the inside with with the blue stuff that seals everything all up, and let that set up really good. Make sure that doesn't mess with your float as well. Clean this out. This doesn't look too bad. Usually what happens when you got a froze up carburetor is this will break off, but it didn't. The nut that goes on here holds the float bowl on. I don't know if it was cracked initially or what, but it's got a crack in it right here. We're going to have to braze that up or get another, and I don't want to get another. I want to braze it up probably. I took the needles out of it. I marked them 1 and marked them. I marked it 1 and I marked this one too. Yeah, there it is. With a electric awl in the back, and I also marked this side 1 and this side 2, so I know. And I wrote down how many turns that these were. I'm probably going to look at these and pull these out of here. Don't know what these are yet, and clean them out and whatnot. Cleaned up the cap and the screen pretty good. We still have an issue with the choke. The choke now works, but I've broke off I've broken it off. So I think probably what I'm going to have to do is drill that and somehow affix this back to it. Unless I can affix it on this side, I don't want to. I want to do it the right way, because this is the right way the choke works. So I need to do that. Okay, so our carb's coming along. We've got to wait for parts for that. Or money. So money and parts for that. I'm going to need a float. I'm going to need a new seat. And I'm going to need a new needle. There is a piece missing, isn't there? Oh, I know what it is. It's the little screw deal that goes down in there. I got to clean up. I got to clean that up too. I think I left it in my sandblaster, so I got to get that out of there. So we're working on doing all that, and a little bit at a time, and work on all the systems. Next thing I'm going to work on is I'm going to pull that cylinder head out, and it's got some stuck valves in it. Have a look at it. It's been repaired before. If you look closely, it's got some big welds right there, brass. So we're going to clean that up. It's going to be nasty and messy, but I'm going to do it. Okay.